Hey everyone, welcome inside the inaugural edition of Maza's Musings, a podcast brought to you by myself, Chris Maza. For those of you who don't know me, I am a managing editor at Reminder Publishing, though I should note that this podcast is not affiliated with Reminder Publishing. That's just where I work. I'm also the board president for the nonprofit All Our Kids, which supports foster families in Western Massachusetts. I'm also a dad, husband, Disney fanatic, appreciator of fine beers, and sports fan, most of all. A lot of this podcast is going to be sports related. We'll tie in some other local issues, social issues, whatever else might come to mind. I hope eventually I'll start to have some guests, but really this is a way for me to cut my teeth into a new media, and one that also Reminder Publishing is going to be breaking into with its own podcast, which will be coming out soon, and hopefully we'll be able to have more information on that for you very shortly. In the meantime, this first podcast is really just going to be a lot of my ramblings, and I hope that you enjoy it. If you'd like to let me know what you think, if you have opinions that you'd like to share with the rest of the group, I'm happy to hear them. You can send them to me at mazasmusings@gmail.com. And hey, let's get started. Well, Patriots fans, it's finally happened. The thing that we were all really waiting for ever since Tommy Curran's initial report that the Patriots have been done with Bill Belichick since the disastrous game against Indianapolis in Germany. The Patriots are, in fact, going to part ways with Bill Belichick. They're calling it a mutual separation, but really, I think we know what it is. And it's an unfortunate end to what has been really a great, great run. And I really just, when you look at these kinds of things, you really realize that as much as you would love the fairy tale ending, it's called that for a reason. Very few people get to ride off into the sunset the way that they want. And obviously, this is not the way that Bill Belichick anticipated going out. I think that the Patriots had a plan, and that plan fell apart. So we're in a very interesting situation. Now, I could go on and wax poetic about Bill Belichick and what he has meant to the Patriots organization and the fan base. But really, I think that there's going to be a lot of that, and there will be a time for that. But the reality is, the coaching search starts now. And some people may be wondering why they didn't make this decision a couple days ago and jump right into this pool. Some people wonder if the Mike Vrabel firing in Tennessee had anything to do with the timeline. And I don't think that those things really have much to do with each other. I recorded something yesterday, Wednesday, the day before this news of Bill Belichick actually leaving the organization broke, where I kind of laid out why the Crafts are taking this slow, methodical approach. And I'll play a little bit of that for you later. But right now, I'd like to kind of get into what the options are for the Patriots. Who are we looking at head coach and GM? So here are a few of the people that really kind of jump out to me off the top of my head. Obviously, internally, the talk has been Jerod Mayo. And some people have noted that the Patriots owner, Robert Kraft, said at the owners' meeting that Jerod Mayo was the heir apparent. Now, that kind of got shoved down. I think it was, again, Tommy Curran who kind of noted that this was said And then the Patriots media guru, Stacey James, kind of put the kibosh on it because there are rules in place about hiring and interviewing. So I think that is still a realistic option for the Patriots. But like I said before, I think the Patriots had a plan, and the plan was to set Mayo up in a situation where everything was kind of stable. And that just didn't happen here. Between some bad roster decisions, the de-evolution of Mac Jones for various reasons, some of them his fault, some of them the fault of the organization and coaching, and we can get into that whole thing another time. I think that while he is still a realistic option, it's not the slam dunk that perhaps it was. Now, there was the possibility that somebody would come in and knock the Kraft's socks off in an interview, but the way that he was described as the heir apparent, Mayo's presence in that building kind of made it feel for a while that any interviews were going to be formalities, that it was really going to be kind of a farce. And we all know that the NFL's hiring and interview processes are really, really flawed, and there is just a lot of nepotism, and that's just the way it is, as much as they try to police that. So obviously Mayo is one of the main candidates. He's got a lot of support in that locker room. You hear it especially on the defense. So when they talk about him as a leader of men, the obvious flaws are a lack of experience at that level. So that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't succeed. It's more you're taking a little bit more of a leap of faith based on what you know about the player. Player turned coach, because the Krafts have familiarity with him in both respects. I'd say that also internally, for a little bit more of a it's possible kind of standpoint, is Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien obviously has head coaching experience, and truthfully, he did some good things with young Deshaun Watson. He had some teams that did fairly well, granted in a weaker AFC South. And a lot of the problems that he ran into in his tenure as the coach in Houston was related to his roster management. So that's a knock. If he's going to come in and say, I really want to have, this control, you're looking at it and you say, listen, we saw what you did with some of these trades. I mean, let's maybe talk a little bit about somebody else running the personnel side of things, because the guy's a good coach. He's proven that at the NFL level. He's proven that at the college level. Now, some people in Alabama may say differently, and some people in New England may say differently based on what has transpired this past year. But honestly, he's a legitimate candidate for the job. I'd say it's not dissimilar to the Springfield mayoral race this year. There were people on the ballot who had experience, and you could consider a legitimate candidate for the job, but you also realize that they were really a long shot, and I think that that's kind of where Bill O'Brien is sitting right now. Externally, you're looking at a lot of the names that have been drummed up on various podcasts and on sports talk radio over the past few months, because we've had months to talk about this, because it's been a while since there's been meaningful football in New England. So we're talking about one of the hot names is Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions. The guy has managed to put together a really, really successful program there, and he's done it with Jared Goff. Truthfully, I don't consider Jared Goff to be all that special of a talent. He was a first-round talent who both of his stops has been in places where he's kind of been successful when he's been put in a program that puts him in the best possible situation to succeed. He's not a guy who's going to lift up a program, but he can execute the program. And I think that's what we thought we were getting with Mac Jones, but the problem was they didn't put the system around Mac Jones. He couldn't raise everybody else's performance with his own performance, and things just fell apart for him. So Ben Johnson is certainly a name that I would consider strongly for this job. Another one that I would really love to see is Frank Smith in Miami. I do think that, however, that there's a real question about whether or not Miami would let him interview with the Patriots. And I really kind of doubt that, but I do think that he is somebody who you would have to add to your list of people that you'd make a request for. There's no harm in asking, so go ahead and ask. And obviously the main candidate in terms of external hires is Mike Vrabel. I mentioned Mike Vrabel at the top of this. I don't think that I can say a lot that hasn't been said about him already. He's a guy who's familiar with New England, but he's not necessarily part of the New England coaching tree. He's been elsewhere. He's had experience, though you could say that some of his experience came in Houston and there were some ties to Bill there. But I think that that would be something that I think a lot of people would look at as, okay, it's got elements of Bill, but he's bringing his own kind of stuff here. So I think that he's certainly on anybody's short list, and he should be. I don't think that it's necessarily the slam dunk. It's decided this is what it's going to be. When it comes to GM, I think that there's a little bit more of a conversation to be had about what the GM's duties are going to be, who they're reporting to, what the relationship with the coach is going to be, and some of how that works out is going to dictate who they bring in for that job, you know, where the Crafts want to go with that position after having somebody who really filled both positions for almost 25 years. It will be interesting to see which direction they go. Obviously, there are some candidates who are familiar, like the Scott Piolis of the world, which certainly, you know, it's worth taking a look at. Elliot Wolf is certainly a candidate internally. I think that there would have to be some serious questions about what has happened with the roster building to this point. Elliot Wolf is somebody who came from outside the organization so he does have a little bit different perspective. So I think that if I were the Crafts, from him, I'd want to hear, okay, you know, this is what I laid out and what I wanted to do, and this is what Bill did. Not so much throwing Bill under the bus, but really explaining how the vision could have been different, how the execution could have been different, and now how that can be corrected, given how things are constituted now. So Elliot Wolf, I think, is somebody who I would consider, but I think he's got some splaining to do. Now, obviously, one of the big candidates for this cycle is someone that I think that the Patriots should be in on, and he is currently in California and likely will not be available to talk for a little bit, but it's 49ers assistant GM Adam Peters. The guy's got some ties to the area. He has helped build a really strong program in San Francisco that has made them a contender on a regular basis. That team has gone out and made moves that they've had to make to put themselves over the top, like the McCaffrey trade. And really, it's created a program that has put a quarterback like Brock Purdy in a position to succeed. Now, I'm not going to say that you could plug any quarterback into that system and it would look exactly the same, because we know that's not true. We've seen other quarterbacks in that system not look as good, including old friend Jimmy Garoppolo. You can't discount some of the traits that Brock Purdy has brought to that has really made the thing hum and really click on all cylinders. But it's much easier to absorb that kind of stuff when you have a solid roster from top to bottom, which is really what I feel they've built in San Francisco. and getting insight from Peters on how he could bring some of those elements to New England and really correct some of the roster deficiencies here, that's a conversation that I would really be interested in having. Now, I told you that I'd play a little bit of the recording that I did yesterday, kind of looking at how I think the Krafts were looking at this whole situation with Bill Belichick and moving on from Bill Belichick and why it was so deliberate. One thing that I neglected to mention in that recording that I'm going to point out now is, on top of everything that I discussed there was the issue of money. Mr. Kraft knew full well that Bill Belichick was under contract, was owed what people believe to be about $25 million, which, even as a billionaire, is not an insignificant sum of money. Bill Belichick made it clear in his end-of-season press conference that that was something that he was clinging to. He said right off the bat, after 20-something years of not talking about his contract, without being asked the question, he says, I am under contract. So he wasn't going to let the Krafts out of that. So I do think that there was an element of negotiating the terms of the separation. And I think that Belichick is going to end up getting his money. And we'll see exactly what that means for other teams who are looking to possibly add Bill Belichick. Because if Bill Belichick is getting $25 million, there is the opportunity for another team to get him more on the cheap. With that said, without getting into where Bill Belichick is headed next, here's my musings on how I think the process was playing out leading up to today's decision. It's pretty clear that from the start, the Patriots have wanted to take a methodical, thoughtful approach, which is what they should do. This isn't any other coach that they're talking about moving on from. It's the greatest coach of all time, and you can debate that whether or not he is. I'm not very interested in that debate. To me, it's pretty clear. And even if he isn't the top coach in your mind, he has to be one of the top 3 or top 5 in the history of the NFL. So you are talking about getting rid of a walking, talking, breathing legend. And I can understand why you want to be thoughtful in that process. And it's not just from a PR standpoint. You also have to consider that there's 20 plus years of structure that has been put in place here. And how much of that do the Krafts want to dismantle? So I understand the fans wanting to see more of a sense of urgency, especially they're seeing other teams putting in their tickets to interview other candidates for their openings. You're seeing more jobs becoming open, so a guy that you might want might be looking elsewhere now. By the way, just today, we got word that Pete Carroll is no longer going to be coaching the Seattle Seahawks, which was a total out of left field thing, I think, for me as someone looking at it from the outside. Perhaps there were rumblings inside the building or around Seattle that we weren't privy to here in Western Massachusetts, but ultimately I think that is kind of a wild card that got thrown into this. So I can understand why people want to get this going, but I think that this is the right approach. So I think ultimately what is happening now is they're not only trying to figure out how to do this gracefully from a PR standpoint, I think they're also trying to figure out how they're going to untangle themselves from Bill Belichick, because people have pointed out, and it's been documented for years, and I think the latest one to kind of really harp on this over the past couple of months, Evan Lazar has pointed out that everything down to the nutrition program has all been sculpted by Bill Belichick. So you're not just, removing one part, one piece. And this even goes beyond Bill having his kids on the team and on the coaching staff and that kind of, messing with things. We're talking about complete institutional structure that has revolved around one man. And that man is Bill Belichick. So these conversations are going on well beyond, the meetings that Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft and Bill Belichick are having. This is going far deeper. They are having internal discussions about how different they want these operations to be going forward. There's the possibility that if you go with a Gerard Mayo, that you wouldn't have to quite dismantle the way that you would, if you go with an outside hire. Mike Vrabel has familiarity with New England, obviously, and with the Crafts and with the organization, but he's also coached elsewhere outside of the, quote-unquote Belichick tree, and he may have a completely different way of running his football program. There's an assumption that, he's a Belichick guy, so he's going to act like a Belichick guy. I'm not necessarily buying that, right? To the idea that, listen, Vrabel's a coach. He's not a GM. Part of the reason why he's out, as far as the speculation goes, is that he did not jive with his GM. And the previous GM that he had kind of also screwed him because, he made some moves that were really poorly conceived. We certainly know what that's all about here in New England. And it really, led to a lackluster roster that was constructed around Vrabel. So there's a whole different dynamic there. And especially if you're going completely outside and you're talking about, someone else like Slowick or, Ben Johnson or something like that, which would mean a complete overhaul, probably. So these are the kinds of things that are going on here. And I think that it behooves the Crafts, it behooves the Patriots as an organization to take this careful approach to this, because yes, there is a little bit of a sense of urgency because the guy you want is there today and he might not be there tomorrow. But at the same time, there is a larger picture that I think needs to be examined, especially when you take into account how deep Bill Belichick's roots are in this organization. And, are we cutting this thing back and hoping that it grows back, or are we uprooting the whole plant and planting something new and hoping that it takes? That's basically the difference here. Honestly, this is the way that I think that they should be conducting this. I don't see any problem with it. I understand why people want to get this going. They're ready to turn the page. The awful taste of a 4-win season is still in their mouths, and they just want the chaser. And I get it. But this is the right way to go. So I feel like I'd also be remiss if I didn't address something that came across my social media feeds just recently, just today, that the Red Sox ownership group is going to forego appearing at Red Sox Winter Weekend at MGM Springfield. I'm totally aghast by this decision, but not surprised by it. It's such a bad move. Look, I understand you got embarrassed last year. You had to actually take your broadcast on Nesson and dub out the boos because you were getting booed. And I'm sorry, you were rightfully getting booed. The direction of that organization at that time, and as it's continuing now, is just wrong. It has been wrong, and it looks like it's continuing to be wrong. We've had off-season after off-season at this point as fans of hearing that the Red Sox are in on this person or in on that person without ever actually coming through with anything significant, anything game-changing. The lack of investment is a real issue, and they'll say, "Hey, we went ahead and we paid Rafael Devers, so we'll spend money." This is a non-salary cap league. I used to kill the Yankees when I was younger as a Red Sox fan. Oh, they buy championships. Oh, this is not legitimate. Anybody can buy a team. And the truth is, no, not anybody can buy a team. But you're the Boston Red Sox. You are among an elite class who can buy a team and buy a championship. There is no excuse for not investing in your team when you are the Boston Red Sox. Now, I've gotten pushback for this stance in the past. People have pointed to teams that spent a lot of money and weren't successful. The San Diego Padres, the New York Mets. And I get that. That is certainly something that you can't just throw a bunch of money and expect that it's 100% going to work. Of course, that's not the case. I'm not saying just spend money to spend money. Really, what we need as fans is to see that there is a cohesive, comprehensive approach. Look, you're not going to hit on every player that you sign. And there are going to be big money busts. That's the way that it is. In any sport, in most industries, you put that kind of money on the line, you are taking a risk. And it's easy for me to say, well, go ahead and spend it because it's not my money. I'm also not a billionaire. So, yeah, I feel like the billionaire can spend a little more money. Honestly, what this comes down to is in a non-salary cap league, with the resources that they have at their disposal, there is no reason why the Boston Red Sox should not be a true player for any player that they consider to be a priority. And I think that's the thing that chaps me the most. I know that there are fans out there who, anytime any free agent signs, they're like, oh, well, the Red Sox blew it again, when there was no interest from the Red Sox in the first place. If the Red Sox do their due diligence on a guy and find that he's not the guy, you know what, he doesn't fit what we want to do, he doesn't fit this philosophy, then fine. That's fine. But the number of times that we hear the Red Sox are in on so-and-so, or the Red Sox, are in the running for so-and-so, and then we find out that they got outbid, it's happened far too often, basically. And it's really not something that should happen. Like, basically, there are a handful of teams that on a consistent basis you could say, all right, well, that they got a ton of money too, and they have this too, so I can see why so-and-so went there. Circumstances always play a part in this. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at some of the players that have come through the news cycle as being someone that the Red Sox are in on, there have just been far too many that you're just like, okay, so that guy went there and he got this. I mean, is Boston that unattractive of a venue, or did you lowball him that much? So there's a real issue there with the amount of investment. And so when you decide And at this point, it's been for several years. So it's an organizational decision. So when you decide as an organization that you are not going to spend, to a certain amount, or you are not, your philosophy is that you are going to act like a mid-level ball club. I'm not going to go as far as to say that they are acting like a poverty franchise. They're acting like one of those teams that's in the middle tier, and they're not one of those teams that's in the middle tier. But when you act like that, and then really the one opportunity that the fan base has access to you, you tuck tail and run and put, Jonathan Papelbon clown show in your place. It is so incredibly insulting to the fans. You technically, I guess, don't owe them any explanation, but seeing as they are the people who you are creating the product for, you do have a level of accountability to them. So I'm so disheartened, and this is an ownership group that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Ever since they took over and they made that. Does anybody remember those Red Sox Nation cards that you could buy to prove that you were a fan? Like that, even from the start, when they did that was something that rubbed me the wrong way. Like it's just like, so, it just always struck me as these guys don't really get it, do they? I just really feel that this is an organization that possibly needs to be uprooted. We were talking about Bill Belichick and what needs to happen with him, and whether it's going to be a pruning or whether it's going to be digging it up from the roots. This is getting to be a dig it up from the roots situation. Because it's one thing when, you've got an absentee ownership group who throws out Sam Kennedy there to look like a dummy and answer questions. But it's a completely different thing when you have a team that doesn't win and the owner is hiding. I mean, they have no incentive to sell, so I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But really, it feels like if there's going to be a true culture change, that is what's going to have to happen. And that makes me really sad, because this is an organization that the people around here cherish. And the fact that the ownership group doesn't appreciate that really is just disappointing on so many levels. And that's my musing on that. Hey everybody, just wanted to say thanks for listening to this first and hopefully first of many podcasts. Thanks for bearing with me through any audio or editing or technical snafus that may have come up in the production of this. Like I said, this is a learning experience for me, and I'm hoping that we can all have a little bit of fun with this. So if you have any tips, if you have any feedback, if you have any takes off of one of my takes, I'd love to hear them at mazasmusings.com. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.